Hello and a very warm welcome to everybody in today's class. President Volodymyr Zelensky and Prime Minister Narendra Modi have, for the first time ever since the beginning of the war, met face to face. It all happened at the sidelines of the G7 summit. Now, a point may have come when India will act as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. Some experts are believing that. To the north and west of India, we have Ukraine. To the north and east of Ukraine, we have Russia. Whenever we are talking about international relations, it is important that we see all these things on map as well. As they met, there might have been exchange of certain statements which showed what Ukraine actually wants from India. Ukraine's stand has also evolved over the years, over the last 1 year. Earlier, during the first period, the first 6 months, Ukraine wasn't happy with India's stand on the Russia-Ukraine war because India never outrightly condemned Russia. It wasn't sitting well with Ukraine. Ukraine even called out India, saying that India has blood on its hands too because it was trading in oil with Russia. But earlier this year, when the first Deputy Foreign Minister, Zaparova, came to India, her stand was rather practical. She said that her country was actually fighting an existential war. She's not going to put any dictates or call out India for the economic and military ties with Russia. But she expects more from India. What does Ukraine expect from us? That is important. Now, what is the summary of India's stand since the last one and a half years for this war? It is largely neutral. Neutrality is one of the major pillars of India's foreign policy when it comes to any war. It doesn't want to meddle between two parties until and unless they are calling India to be a mediator. India never wants to entertain any sort of meddling when it comes to Kashmir because it's a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. It does not want any third party involvement. Similarly, it doesn't want to become the third party in somebody else's issues. India is following a path of realpolitik rather than geopolitics. What is realpolitik? Realpolitik is having a strategy to ensure that the national interest is upheld. We can never deny that the eventuality of international interest is national interest itself. So it has become much more practical over the years. Next, we have to understand that India is highly dependent when it comes to cheap energy and military hardware from Russia, most of it. It is trying to evolve there, but it is making piecemeal changes. So the military as well as exports of energy has also increased. It has called for respecting the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all the states. And this by itself speaks a lot. India is one of the few countries, I might say India is the only country that has the courage and the standing to look Russia in the eye and say that it is not an era of war. So, India's position in the world is so important that almost all the countries are actually interested in what India has to say when it comes to Russia-Ukraine war. Now, if we talk about what does the West actually want or what does Ukraine want? India for Ukraine is an important country that I have already told you. It has made certain statements which shows that how it is a little insecure about its relations, its military relations with Pakistan. Some critics earlier said that India won't help Ukraine much because of the Kashmir stand that Ukraine has. Other than that, the military relations that Ukraine has with Pakistan. But it is true. Let's talk about that as well. West, what does the West want? West earlier wanted that India should slack down its trade relations and military relations with Russia, but that has changed. We will talk about that as well. Why did it change? But the West wants India to become more involved. Maybe to condemn Russia is more important for them. But India has clearly stated its position with respect to Russia. Russia is a time tested and steady friend of India. That is why it is possible that West is comfortable with that also. Now, the one thing that we have to ensure that we know is India has become the embodiment of the neutral stand that the global south has. It is expected of India as the chair of G20 and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to become more involved, more vocal. Maybe it is time, according to the West, to start condemning Russia or start becoming more vocal with Russia. China and Brazil, earlier, they have tried to become a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. But they do not have that much leverage over Russia as much as India has, and this is acknowledged by even China. Why is India the most suited country for making a peace deal? First, of its non-aligned policy. Since independence, it has been following that. India never became a part of a group which has given it much leverage to maintain political and strategic autonomy. It has never joined any sort of bloc, which has freed India from the shackles of any sort of past blunders. And that is why India is one of the countries which is actually looked up at by other countries for its political and strategic autonomy. It welcomes dialogues with virtually anyone. Why am I saying that? Because it has been successful thus far to maintain good relations with Russia and also USA. It is one of the few countries which can maintain relations and work on a tightrope so well balanced. It can talk with Cuba. Similarly, it can talk with the USA. If it can talk with Ukraine, it can also talk with Russia. So its open approach policy has helped India to become one of the most suited, not one, the most suited country to be a peacemaker. It has a very healthy partnership with both the great powers, as I have already told you, with USA and USSR. Now, India, from non-aligned policies, moving towards multi-alignment. It's an all-vector hedge. In order to ensure that it doesn't put all of its eggs in one basket, it maintains good relations with all the countries, almost all the countries, all the superpowers. So, India is getting the best of both worlds. USA also doesn't want India to openly condemn Russia. Why? Because Russia and India are friends. If Russia is condemned by India, Russia will move closer to China, which it already has done. But if India actually more aggressively condemns Russia, China has already thrown its lot with Russia. These two countries, if they come together, will become another challenge. So, in order to not make Russia feel cornered, India is important for the USA. Also, India, because of multi-alignment and hedging its interest, has considered and has maintained its strategic autonomy. India can well maintain military balance with both USA and USSR. Russia needs India to ensure that its oil is bought by at least one of the big economies. India is a big economy. Because of that, it's a give and take policy. Because of that, what happens? India has a leverage over Russia, and Russia cannot afford to lose India. So these are the certain points you can write in your mains examination as well. Another point is that India in itself is a great emerging power in Asia. It is the voice and conscience of the developing world. If we talk about the developing world or the global south, most of the countries are developing right now. And most of them have the same viewpoint. They are not happy with the sanctions of the West, yet they think that Russia has done wrong by invading Ukraine. So India has become an embodiment of this neutral stand, and that is why it is one of the most balanced countries. So these are the points which make India the most suited country to be a peacemaker. The thing is that Russia also tried to become a peacemaker. It has thrown all its lot with Russia. Every bet it has on Russia. That was very well manifested by its peace plan, which Ukraine calls it is totally biased. So China is not one of those countries which could be actually neutral in nature, and that is why India is necessary. Next point is that why doesn't India actually want to help Ukraine? This is from a critical perspective. Some people say that it is because of Kashmir stand that Ukraine has. It's not. Many of the countries with which India has good relations also have strong opinions on Kashmir. But India never let those strong opinions come in the way of cooperation. As I told you, it is an open approach policy. It has condemned, it has diplomatically protested against some of the statements, but we cannot say that because of this particular point only, India will not cooperate with Ukraine. Next, the nuclear program of India has been highly criticized by Ukraine. And Prakash Katoch's statement to First Post said that Zelensky's appeal to India of helping it is actually a perversity of fate because Ukraine never took a stand for India at the UN. And now, when Ukraine needs India the most, it is not going to take a stand. But that is not correct. Many countries, again, as I told you, have strong opinions on India's nuclear policy. But India never let it constrain the relationship. In fact, if we talk about USA only, USA also was of the opinion that India has done wrong and India has wreaked havoc by conducting Pokhran. But India and USA, both these countries took out their relationship from the abyss and moved forward. And right now, India and USA's relationship has been at its best ever in history. Another point is dealing of arms with Pakistan. No, that's also not correct because many people don't know that because of political reasons, maybe. But India has relations when it comes to military with Ukraine as well. In fact, Ukraine has sold arms to both India and Pakistan. In terms of value, Ukraine has sold arms of higher value to India. And turbines for Indian Navy has dominated their trade. Joint modernization of certain military hardware was also taken. It was actually proposed, but not taken as of yet. Sorry for that. It was proposed. Spain, Italy, Norway, Sweden, these are certain countries which have military relations with Pakistan, as in selling them hardware, technology. Even Russia has done that. But India never restricted itself to these parochial viewpoints. So no, not because of these reasons. India has certain factors which has shaped its foreign policy when it comes to Russia-Ukraine war. First factor is India's and Russia's relationship goes way back. You wouldn't believe that Russia opened its first consulate in Mumbai even before independence. It was in 1900. Beginning of the Cold War, since the beginning of the Cold War, India started sympathizing with the Soviet Union. It started as a strategic sympathy, and anti-imperialist notions of India helped Russia and India's relationship grow. After the end of the Cold War, Russia's and India's relationship did not go down. even after this particular war, it won't go down. There is another important factor that India and Russian cheap oil. At an interview in Austria, Dr. S. Jaishankar, when he was asked a question about why his country continues to trade with Russia even after the war, doesn't it have any sort of humanitarian stand? He says that, of course, Europe has also reduced its oil or energy trade in a fashion it is comfortable. If they have a per capita income of 60,000 something or whatever they have, they still can't manage it comfortably enough. Imagine a country having a per capita income of 2,000. What about that? He's not in a position, he cannot afford to buy energy at a higher price. There is a very peculiar key point we can take from here when it comes to USA. We'll talk about that as well. See, Indian economy is the fastest growing economy, one of the fastest growing economies in the world. IMF has forecasted 6.8% growth for India for this year. For even USA, it is very less. So it is one of the fastest growing economy. In order to ensure that it remains the fastest growing economy, it needs energy. Right now, India is getting cheap energy from Russia. By 2030, India is forecast to be the third largest economy in the world after the USA and China, and it is already the third largest oil consuming country in the world. So it is going to increase, and as I told you that USA has something to do with it. See, last April when Jaishankar visited the White House for a virtual summit, he said that he basically ignored the comment made by certain USA voiceovers. And their US officials told their Indian counterparts they understand India's energy needs and were hoping only that India would not accelerate Russian oil purchases. But they are now okay with it. Why? See, right now, because of these sanctions or because of the optics that the USA has, it cannot buy oil from Russia, although it wants to ensure that the supply of oil in the world remains at a comfortable point. But it cannot buy oil from Russia, which is cheap. So India and China and certain countries, they can buy cheap oil from Russia, refine it, and then export it. In this way, what happens? The supply of oil remains polished in the world, and USA doesn't have to get under any sort of constraint or any sort of hypocritical questions from the other countries. And here, India and China are earning margins as well. So, this is all a part of international theories and relations and facts. So, please be careful. We have to think at a larger pace. Then only we can qualify this exam really well. Now, in December, India imported 1.2 million barrels of Russian crude. In January, the share of Russian crude rose to 28% of India's oil imports. This is a lot, even more than pre-war levels. Factor number 3 is Moscow is India's biggest arms dealer. The fact here is that if we talk about MiG, if we talk about Sukhois, these are known as flying coffins because they are so old and deteriorating. India is modernizing its structure of military, its infrastructure and hardware of military by taking help from French government, Israeli government and American versions. But the thing is that supposedly I have a house and all the furniture are from a certain company. Now I'm really upset with the certain company's furniture. Now I want to modernize it. I cannot at once afford to let go of all the furniture and get a new furniture. So I'm making piecemeal changes. India is also doing the same. But to ensure that the supply and demand shock is not there and India can do it at a comfortable phase, India is still dependent a lot on Russian imports. All right. It has, when it comes to arms trade, it has imported arms around $13 billion in weapons since the past 5 years. It's a lot. Factor number 4 is that India wants to prevent Putin from getting closer to Xi Jinping. That's something that US is also worried about. The more you corner one country, the more it will go perverse. And that is why right now the biggest security threat for India is China. For US also it is that. So, in order to ensure that India remains the fastest growing economy, because once you have grown your economy, you can flex your muscles. It remains well done with its security infrastructure. USA also doesn't want India to go all out on Russia. How can they then balance China? So it's a give and take relationship that the world has right now. The thing is that New Delhi's ultra-realist approach to foreign policy, it won't be impacted by serving the self-serving purpose between the USA and Russia. But now it is time to take a more active role. When India will take an active role, it will open new dimensions for itself in the upcoming days. The thing is that there could be an impact on sanctions, because right now fresh sanctions have been imposed on Russia again. How did India and Russia's relation fare during the times of sanctions? We can talk about that as well. The thing is that imports and exports and trade between Russia and India are majorly dependent upon governmental roles when it comes to military, when it comes to energy. The private sector in India won't be able to do much of trade with Russia. India is an economy which is run by private sector right now. So the avenues for the private sector to have a trade relationship with Russia comes down. There is a de-dollarization drive that is going on between Russia and many countries, such as they are wanting to use the Indian rupee and the Russian ruble for trade between them and not dollar. But India's imports from Russia totaled $32.8 billion from April to December 2022. The exports to Russia is not a lot. So that becomes a challenge. How to balance the ruble and rupee difference, that becomes the challenge. Another thing is that there is higher import of petroleum. We are importing more petroleum from Russia. India's exports are just to Russia fell by over 1/3. It is just $2.2 billion for the same period. That means from April to December 2022. So de-dollarization over here is a challenge. Why dollar can not be easily replaced when it comes to India and Russia? Because of the trust issues. Chinese yuan is there between China and Russia. They are actually dealing in yuan. But if Jack Ma's asset can be taken by the government, what will be the trust on yuan? Nobody's assets are safe. So there is a trust issue with respect to yuan as well. Then we have Brazil and Argentina. They are also thinking about to have a trade in their own currency and not use dollars. But Brazil and Argentina, they have introduced new currencies like almost 8 to 9 times since the 1980s. And when there is not a lot of trust in a currency, it becomes harder for them to be accepted as a hard currency. And that is the entire problem. So you must be thinking that's something that is the same for rupee as well. See, Reserve Bank is already very sensitive with respect to rupee that is held overseas. It is also not freely convertible. That makes it less liquid. Many people do not know this, but 100 years ago, many West Asian countries used to use rupees. As late as 1969, the UAE and some of the other Gulf states used the Indian rupee as their currency. But because of the erosion of the economy in the 1960s and 70s, the trust on the rupee also fell down. And what happens that when the trust falls down, it becomes harder for the world to accept that currency as a mode of exchange. Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bangladesh are some of the countries which have a huge trust on rupee and they generally can trade in rupee. So, this is the entire issue. The trade imbalance that I told you, that India is not exporting a lot and importing much from Russia. It can be overcome. How? See, right now the demographics and population of Russia is such that India has a very small market over there. India cannot find a huge market in Russia. The demands are different. But we can explore the labor and service sector. We can understand or come to an understanding where an infrastructure, seamless infrastructure can be made in which the movement of labor from India to Russia can be easier. Russia can provide easy residency, easy applying policies, but hard citizenship policies so that people do not go and stay there. What will happen by this particular move is that if we are not earning foreign exchange with the help of trade, we can earn foreign exchange with the help of remittances. This is what India is doing with West Asia. So, this is the entire scenario right now with respect to India, Russia, and Ukraine. I hope you understood this class well, and I hope you will stay engaged for the next segment as well. Thank you so much for watching.